I have served in the Texas legislature for 8 sessions, but every year I'm able to report back to the folks who elected me, and this is really the highlight of my year, to be able to be with you and share and talk about our common goals, talk about our common challenges, talk about what's happened, what's happening to us now, and where we're going from my perspective. Phil, it's always good to see your son Ryan with you. That's what makes me feel good when I see folks that I helped raising their kids here, and knowing that what we do in Austin matters. It makes a difference. The good thing about the chamber is that you represent every part of our community. And I would be remiss if I didn't congratulate the chamber on a hell of a West Texas Legislative Summit. Walt and everybody did a fantastic job. I don't know the final figures, but I would suspect we raised a heck of a lot more money than we ever have in the past. I know we had about 23, 24 state representatives there. We had a senator and we had some congressmen. But the reality is they got to showcase West Texas. And that's what that event's about. And I want to thank everyone present today who had a part in that. I look over at my Angelo State friends and know what you had to do to host that, and thank you for that. To Lee and the Cactus for the pre-summit. It was a heck of an event. I've told August Pfluger, I said, you're not going to be able to surpass this. Now you can try, but you're not going to be able to measure up on what we just did. So I know you may not believe this, but I don't really have anything scheduled to say. That may appear frightening to you, but to me, it's about being able to talk to you about what's important to me. And so I do have a broad framework that I want to talk about, but literally, I don't want to script any time that I have before you. I want to be able to speak from my heart, speak about the issues that affect all of us, and talk about how we're going to work together. In this current political climate, Jeff Rotman, before I came in, asked me about the current political climate and the divisions we have. And I told him, yes, we've got some challenges, but I hope to continue to represent you in engaging in debate. Keep in mind, America does not debate issues. Americans debate issues. Now, are there some, that's just what they do. They enjoy it, they like to engage in it, and they're good at it, some of them. But a lot of them, they don't engage in that debate. They just let it happen. But we can never forget that that's what's made this country great, is to be able to engage in active, vigorous debate. Does not mean that we have to agree, because certainly there's a lot of opportunities to disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. One of the challenges facing the state is we have changing demographics. This state is growing. We grew about 3 million people in the last 10 years. We went through a redistricting process. We reapportioned House races, Senate races, congressional races, judicial races, and we did that after I talked to you last September. If you recall, I talked to you before we started on our 3rd special session in which we were doing redistricting. Well, we did all that. And I have a new district. We've added Coleman County to the other 9 counties that I represent. So now House District 72 has about 194,000 souls that live and work in the Concho Valley. They go to school, they have a job, they drive our roads, they drink our water, they get educated, and they look to Austin to give them the infrastructure needs that allow them to live and work in rural Texas. Before the redistricting process started, there were 17 state representatives that represented 2/3 of the land mass of Texas. That is all the land lying west of I-35. There are 17 of us. There are 24 that represent Harris County. There are 14 that represent Dallas County. 11 in Tarrant, 10 in Travis. You can tell right quick, we're outgunned. We may be outvoted, but we're never going to be able to hush our rural representation to advocate on behalf of rural Texas. Guess what? They don't grow beef cattle in the back of the H-E-B in San Antonio. They don't grow cotton in the back of the Men's Warehouse in Dallas. Typically, they don't have any oil and gas wells in Dallas. Their food, their fiber, their hide, their hair, their oil, their gas is all generated in rural Texas. And the folks in this room and others similarly situated have to have enough water, have to have good roads to get to their communities and take their goods and services out. They have to have a good education, and they have to have a good job. That's my job, is to make sure all that infrastructure is in place to allow each of us to live in rural Texas and to provide those goods and services to urban Texas. That's a challenge. But I promise you, it does not come without vigorous debate. And so don't be fooled that says we can't participate even in constructive dialogue with folks throughout this state. A lot of extreme thoughts are being floated around, saying, well, why even talk to the other side? They're too stupid. They don't understand the issues. Folks, don't crater to that. Please don't. You have to have folks like me that you support to say, we want you to go down there and actively engage in debate to represent our interests so that we can have what we need to live here and work in rural Texas. Now, do we have anything to work with? Yes. Y'all have done a magnificent job of surviving COVID. This state has recovered quicker than any other state in the union. I can go through statistics, but I will tell you that we've recovered faster from COVID and our economy has recovered faster. We have the lowest unemployment rate, and it has resulted in extraordinary revenue for this state. The current estimate by the Comptroller of Public Accounts says that we've got almost $14 billion in general revenue in excess of what was originally projected. That will be available to the budget writers as we write the budget for the next biennium. $14 billion. But what that doesn't include is another $14 billion in our rainy day fund called the Economic Stabilization Fund. I like to refer to it as the state's mattress. Well, I've told them we need to quit putting money in the mattress if we never take any out, because that's money that's idled. It's out of the economy. It's not fixing anything. And oh, by the way, once it reached $14 billion, it pours over into the general revenue of the state. So we're going to have opportunities as we move forward in the next legislative cycle to fix some things. Contreras talked about broadband. 1 in 4 Texans does not have access to high-speed internet. If you don't have access to high-speed internet, you don't have access to filling out a job application online. You don't have the ability to do dual credit at Howard College and or Angelo State. You don't have the ability to access medical care, telemedicine, without high-speed internet. it makes the job of living in rural Texas even that much more difficult. And so your state has committed, and we've committed almost $500 million. We have some federal funds that allow us to do that. We've created a council to look at it, to make sure we map the whole state and make sure that we have, where in this state are we missing high-speed internet? And so we're doing that process now. We've committed an extraordinary amount of money to our road system. Almost $90 billion under the UTP over the next 10 years will be devoted to roads in Texas. A large part of that, comparatively speaking, is devoted to rural Texas, to make sure that as they extract those oil and gas and other minerals out of the ground, and they tear up our roads, and they use our water, that we have the ability to recover some of those costs. So we're devoting a lot of our highway resources back to funding roads, particularly here in rural Texas. So that's encouraging. We've committed even more money to higher education, but we have opportunity to help higher education even more. We don't have the ability to forgive loans like some people have, but we just got to make sure higher education is as affordable as the state can make it. Public education. I will tell you, there's an attack on public education. I'm embarrassed by some in this state who don't recognize the vital nature of public education to our very communities and to our very society. There are some that want to destroy it. The superintendent and I talked a little bit earlier before the meeting. There are some that want to destroy public education. They're using catchphrases, CRT, woke, a lot of things to tear down our institutions in the name of parental rights. Well, I'm as supportive as anybody of parental rights. Who would question parental rights? But what they're doing is, that is a mechanism by which they can introduce distrust about our education system so that they can insert, in the name of choice, the ability to take public dollars and divert them to private and parochial schools. Now, I'm supportive of private schools and parochial schools. It is a choice that parents get to make. But where I draw a line is taking public dollars and moving them to those institutions without accountability or without non-discriminatory policies. That's where I draw the line. My job is to make sure public education has the resources they need to educate not only my children, but my grandchildren, but everyone that comes through the system. That is our obligation as elected representatives, to make sure the public school system is well-funded, efficient, and provides the greatest diffusion of information possible. That's going to be challenged in the next session. We're going to have a lot of money. We're going to have a lot of money to decide what the priorities are. If you're a retired teacher who has not got a cost of living increase in 13 years, I say 2013 is when the last cost of living increase came for teachers. 2013. Think about inflation. Teachers on fixed income. That's a responsibility we have. They recently completed a survey about teachers and what challenges they're facing. Do you know that 77% of the teachers in this state are contemplating quitting? 77%. Now, Carl, I don't know what our challenges are, but I'll bet you we have not hired every teacher that we need for SAISD. And we're seeing it across the state. So we have to address that. We have to address that not only in their financial compensation, but what they can expect after a lifetime of service to pay them with regard to their retirement. and their health care. That's our job to do that, and we need to address that. And I think we'll be able to do that. But we're asking them to do way too much. Not only do they have to be a teacher, a tester, a counselor, they're having to be a guardian. They're having to protect their students and the safety of their students. We're going to have to, as a legislature, address some real issues. I hope we do. I hope we don't just give you political platitudes. I hope we don't just give you the standard responses. Oh, we can't do that for this, that, or those reasons. I hope we engage in the discourse that I just told you about and try to protect our children and our teachers and our superintendents and the folks who live and work in the system and the public at large. I just read an article about 2 students in Everman headed to a football game last Friday night that were intercepted by law enforcement. And they had an automatic pistol and 60 rounds of ammunition. 2 18-year-olds headed into the football game where 3,000 people were present. Thank God law enforcement got them. But what if they hadn't? What if they hadn't? We need to talk about that. We need to talk about it as a legislature and as a state. What is our priorities and how do we protect our people? Hopefully that will be an issue that we'll engage in, and our statewide elected leaders will help facilitate that discussion instead of simply stonewalling it. There's a lot of other issues facing the state. We have a lot of challenges. We have a growing state, growing needs for infrastructure. Everybody likes to enjoy them. The 1,137 people, I got the exact figure. For years I had said 1,000 people are moving to the state. It's not really accurate. There are actually 1,037 people moving to the state every day. They're not bringing their water. They're not bringing their asphalt. They're not bringing their schools. But they expect all that when they get here. My job is to make sure that they have that infrastructure available to them so that your chamber can continue to attract businesses, that your hospital can continue to attract doctors and healthcare people that provides those services to our community. It's a challenge. But how do we as a state make sure that we continue to keep a regulatory framework that is minimal as possible, but yet allow entrepreneurial spirit to continue to build this state? Now, one of the things holding us back, quite frankly, is our property tax system. A long time ago, 100 plus years ago, this state determined that we weren't going to have an income tax, and I support that. I voted for a constitutional amendment that said we would never have an income tax. And so we're never going to have an income tax. But how do we fund local governments? I'm looking over at my city folks. There are county folks here. How do we fund those services? Well, there are fees, application fees, permit fees, and there are property taxes. The city and the county have engaged in vigorous, hopefully, public debate about what's an appropriate rate to collect property taxes. They didn't set those rules. I set those rules. I don't collect any property taxes. They collect property taxes. I just tell them how they can do it. And I change it all the time. The reality is, you as taxpayers need as much information as you can to determine how those taxes are collected, what they're being collected for, how much revenue is that, and is that an appropriate amount? Now, they just went through a budget process. Hopefully you attended that. You participated in it because it was playing out before your very eyes, the second half of the process. The first half of the process is what your appraisal came in at. How many of you protested your appraisal? Mayor, how many of them showed up for your budget hearing? 0. We're so concerned about this hand and the value of our houses and the appraisal process that we ignored the budget side where they set the rate. Hopefully you've participated in that process. Now, what have we done as a state? We've increased your homestead exemption from $15,000 to $40,000. We said if you buy a house, I know there's realtors here, if you buy a house in mid-year, you get to use that exemption for the whole year. That didn't happen in the past. So we're trying to nibble around the edges and make the appraisal process fair and the property tax collection side of fair. But the reality is we're still paying a lot for property taxes. What can we do? Well, the legislature, several years back, said we're not happy with only paying 42% of the cost to educate our kiddos. There are a bunch of us that said the state needs to have a more active participation and pay more as a percentage to educate our kids. So we've been doing that. We've been increasing the percentage that the state pays and diminishing the amount that local taxes pay. Now, what we've done in recent years is compress your tax rate. If you've been paying attention to your school property tax rate, we have forced compression of that. You may not have noticed it on your tax bill, but we've done so. We've brought your taxes down dramatically from a percentage standpoint. We've increased the state share. Now, the most effective way that we can help each one of you, the state can't write a check back to you. Again, I don't collect any property taxes. How are we going to help you with your property taxes? We're going to help you by further compressing your school taxes. Now, I feel very comfortable that we're going to commit at least $3 billion, if not $4 billion of this revenue to further compression of your school taxes. That's really the only way we can have an effect on people's property tax. I anticipate doing that. I think we will help do that. So, as a legislator looking forward to the next session, and I've been before you when we've had a $10 billion deficit. I think I've confided to you how difficult it is to do our job when there's a lot of money. I can tell you the easiest time is when we don't have any money. It's easy for me to say no, we don't have it. But I have found over the years that the more slop in the trough, the more hogs tend to show up. There will be a lot of hogs in Austin starting January the 10th. Did I tell you that there's an election coming up? For those of you date challenged, you may begin early voting on October the 24th and continue to do so until November the 4th. General election is on the 8th. Elections matter. Don't buy into this hogwash that our election system is corrupt. Don't buy into that. When people talk to me, my first question is, do you believe that our election system is corrupt? If their answer is yes, I have nothing to say to them. Nothing. If we can't start with a basic premise of truth and veracity, then there's no business in this process for that kind of delusion. So we're going to have an election. I trust Bonnet and her election office here. Hell, I got elected Oh no, that was corrupt. I shouldn't have been elected. How asinine. They're corrupt, mine are just great. Well, what I want to communicate to you is there are a lot of things good in this state. Are we divided? Yes. Do we have challenges ahead of us? Yes. But should we withdraw and build walls around ourselves and our communities and not communicate with others? No. There will be at least 37 new state representatives when we are sworn in January. 37. There are 150 of us. 22 or 3%. Going to be new. What I can assure you is each one of those 37 will be far more partisan, far more divided, far more radically situated, because the primaries in which they have come out of have made them more radicalized. We will be even more divided in the next session because of the process. Remember I told you about redistricting. Well, when we put our fingers on the scale, we make everyone's district stronger for the incumbent, whether it be Democrat or Republican. There are very few toss-up districts in this state. The races won or lost in the primary. What comes out of the primary is more partisanship. Those 37, maybe more, will be far more partisan. So the challenge will be not to withdraw, not to pull back, but to convince them that we still need to engage in the process, and we still, for your benefit and your children and your grandchildren, to have the resources they need to live and work in my opinion, the greatest part of the greatest state in the greatest country in this world.